A few days ago, I talked about fighting styles that I think should be added to Grand Peace Online. I think the natural next step would be to talk about weapons that I think should be added. This is especially true since in Grand Peace Online, the alternatives to Devil Fruits are split into two categories: weapons and fighting styles. Typically, fighting styles give you a full set of moves, but weapons are for the most part boss drops with 2 attacks. This has led to most people using fighting styles for things like Geppo and Soru, and then using boss drop weapons for most of their damage output. This gives weapons a unique place in the world of GPO that is different from what I've seen in other One Piece games. But hey, enough intro talk, let's get right into the video with what my suggestions are for weapons that should be added to Grand Peace Online. The first suggestion that I want to talk about is definitely a fan favourite. The weapon in question is the heavily showcased Yodu. So Yodu is the sword used by Mihawk, and overall the design is amazing, and its potential for a weapon in GPO looks very promising. We've seen a lot of the moves showcased in old sneak peeks, but nothing has been officially recently shown in the Discord server, so we can assume that it is still very much in the works. I think this sword would be a game changer if done well, and I could definitely see it being a popular weapon. However, with the addition of item trading in the recent update, if this weapon was added to the Robux store, it might be a lot easier to obtain than I first assumed. Because if it was added to the Robux store, you could effectively trade real in-game items like, I don't know, a Logia, and immediately get that sword, like just off the bat, so that would be really interesting to see how that works. The second weapon on my list is one of my personal favourites, Smoker's Jite. So this weapon was used by a marine, Smoker, and the Jite is a unique looking weapon when compared to standard katanas. It is refreshing to see how different and cool it looks, but the Jite's looks aren't the only unique thing about it. It also has the awesome power of being able to nullify Devil Fruit abilities. This means that Smoker can hit Logia users without having to use Buso Haki. This would be a great addition to help Fruitless players who, with how short Haki duration is, even max Buso Haki is still pretty short, could definitely use this against players with Logia dodges. I'm not sure what abilities this weapon would have, but maybe it could have something similar to Trident Impale, like the ability shown in this image here. The next weapon that I want to talk about is one that belongs to one of my favourite One Piece characters, Usopp. I thought about just including Usopp's current weapon, but I feel like out of respect for his character, I have to mention all of his past weapons too. So the first weapon that Usopp used was a small slingshot, which he used in combination with his bag of different types of ammunition to create really interesting attacks. Usopp's next weapon was the more recognisable Kabuto. This weapon was definitely a large step up from the small slingshot that we knew, and through the size and increase and the power of dials, Kabuto is capable of some pretty powerful attacks. The final and most recent slingshot weapon that Usopp uses is his Kuru Kabuto. So this weapon is a gigantic step up from his old weapons, and honestly the Kuru Kabuto is arguably one of the strongest weapons in Grand Peace Online. I mean One Piece, sorry. It's not yet in Grand Peace Online, but if it was, I could definitely see it immediately being the strongest gun in Grand Peace Online. Its strength mainly comes from its compatibility with these things called pop greens, and pop greens can be used to create a variety of plant-based attacks. My favourite pop green is definitely the Midori Boshi, the Devil Pop Green. The fourth weapon I want to talk about is one that I definitely haven't seen in any One Piece game before, and the weapon in question is Nami's Sorcery Climate Act. So this weapon is characterized by its ability to manipulate weather and use weather-based attacks. I'm going to skip over the first 2 versions of this Climate Act, and I'm going to focus almost purely on the final and most recent version. One of the most obvious differences between the Sorcery Climate Act and the past 2 models is that the Sorcery Climate Act is an orange and white, whereas the past 2 were blue. I think this weapon could be a cool addition to GPO, as the potential for cool and unique attacks is obvious. The easiest attack to incorporate into GPO would be the Thunderbolt tempo, since we've already seen lightning in the form of the Stormy Seas. The Sorcery Climate Act has a range of cool other abilities that I'd like to see added, and in no particular order here are some of them: Gust Sword, Weather Egg, and Thunder Trap. The fifth weapon that I want to talk about is actually two different sets of swords. So I decided to mention these because of the recent news that two sword style will be coming soon. I say recent, it was announced a while ago, but we've been getting a lot of sneak peeks recently, so that's why I use the word recent. I chose two iconic sets of swords that are used by some of the most notable two sword style users in One Piece. The first is Vista's swords, which I overall like a lot, and I think the design looks really nice. When Vista uses these swords, flower petals are created, and since Vista's fruit isn't mentioned anywhere, we can assume these swords are somehow producing these flower petals. This could be a nice visual mechanic that could be worked into the game, and it will make the sword look a little bit different. The second set of swords is definitely more recognizable for those who are up to date in the anime or manga. I am of course referring to Odin's swords. It is probably a little early to add these swords into the game, since we don't even have Wano yet, but the two swords are called Amino Habakiri and Enma. I mean, just look at how awesome these swords look, and their history as Odin swords makes them even more awesome. The final weapon that I'm going to mention in today's video is just a personal favourite of mine. It's a little bit funny, but it also is pretty cool looking. The weapon in question is Funkfried. So Funkfried was a weapon used by Spandam, who was the former chief of Cypherpole 9, and the weapon is just a cool weapon that I thought was really creative and a really nice use of Devil Fruits in One Piece. Basically, Funkfried is the sword that ate the Zozono Mi and became an elephant sword. Do not ask me how this makes any sense, because I have no idea how a sword eats a devil fruit. But regardless, this sword somehow managed to do it, and it gained the powers of the elephant Zoan. The main ability of the sword is that it can transform into a full elephant, which in my opinion would work similar to the way bunnies work in GPO, where the user of the weapon could direct the elephant to attack an opponent or an NPC. However, another key ability of Funkfried is that, like all Zoans, the sword has a hybrid form. In the context of One Piece, this is used to increase the range on the sword by a comical amount. In GPO, I think this would be a cool weapon to add, and overall it would be a really funny addition to the game. And okay, that's enough for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I have loads more suggestions or ideas for weapons that should be added, so I might make a part 2. But also, if you have any suggestions, weapons that you'd like to see added, make sure to comment them down below, and I'll make sure to read every single comment. I hope you're having a great day, evening, or whatever time it is for you, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Bye.